program is brought to you in association with First National Bank of Botswana. Good evening and a very warm welcome to First Issues. The national budget for the 2023-24 financial year was announced on the 6th of February 2023 by Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Honorable Peggy Serame. Within the budget were 6 key features highlighted: digital transformation, business environment reforms, value chain development, infrastructure development, sustaining livelihoods, and climate change. These features are envisioned to help Botswana transform from upper middle income to high income status. This is while contending in a global economy that is flagged for a possible recession, with global economic growth forecast at 2.9%, which some economists have warned is ambitious. Following the budget announcement, FNB Botswana held the annual FNB Budget Review Seminar 2023, where various financial experts and key industry stakeholders shared their thoughts on the national budget, while acknowledging the global, regional and domestic economic situations. We caught up with 2 panelists on the sidelines of the event: John Keynes, who's client strategist at RMB, and Hollywood actor Denham Richards, to pick their minds on what Botswana needs to do to attain her ambitions, paying particular attention to their own industries and areas of expertise. Our first sit-down was with John Keynes, who started off by unpacking the global economic outlook for 2023 and how a possible global recession will affect Botswana. John, thank you so much for coming on First Issues and affording us your time. We are at the FNB Budget Review Seminar, and you were giving a presentation starting off with the global economic outlook. Perhaps you could unpack that for our viewer?
My key point was just for Botswana to be a little bit cautious about the global environment and how it can spill over and affect Botswana. Unfortunately, after 2 years of very strong global growth, it looks like it's almost certain the global economy is going to slow down aggressively in 2023. So the US perhaps in recession, Eurozone skirting recession. The only area of strength is China. And obviously as a small open economy, Botswana is very much affected by the global markets. Obviously the demand for diamonds, for instance, will dry up if the global economy slows down. And then let's not forget, across the border in South Africa, there's a lot of problems there. Obviously around load shedding, the economic outlook is not very encouraging, a lot of inflationary pressures there. And then there's obviously spillovers into Botswana through the currency link, through importation of goods. If they're more expensive in South Africa, it will be more expensive in Botswana. So once again, key point, nothing to panic about, but the global environment is just not as encouraging for Botswana as it has been in the past 2 years. And of course, Botswana really experienced strong growth in the past 2 years. The growth environment globally is not going to allow that in the year ahead.
Let us speak some more on those warnings. There have been warnings of a looming global recession, not to the devastation similar to that of 2008, but still concerning, right? So in the event that that becomes a reality, how do you see it affecting Botswana, but most importantly, looking at her ambitions from the national budget speech?
If you take the IMF forecast, for instance, they're looking at around 3% economic growth in the global economy this year. It doesn't sound too terrible. It's not too terrible. Global growth averages around 4% over the long term. Usually the IMF would define a global recession as 2.5%. So 3% is closer to global recession, but it's not terrible. But let's put it in perspective of 2008 and 2020, when the global economy actually deteriorated, actually negative growth, the economy actually contracted. So again, it's back to your point. Look, the global economy is slowing down. This is not 2008, this is not 2020, or at least we hope so. The unknown, of course, is as the US in particular slows down, does that create financial market stress? So what we've had this year, or over the past year, IMF, Bank for International Settlements, New York Fed, They go out there and try and identify financial market vulnerability. They're not finding anything, doesn't mean it's not there, but the crisis situation, which would really affect Botswana badly, is if indeed a US or a global recession spilled over into financial market stress. And you go back to 2008, for instance, financial market stress, Botswana simply couldn't sell diamonds, or De Beers on your behalf couldn't sell diamond. The supply chain financing just dried up completely. There was no money. It was devastating for Botswana's economy back then. Nothing to do with Botswana. It's just financial markets, global recession. Once again, that's not the environment we're looking at or the IMF is looking at. But still, weak global growth, not a good backdrop for Botswana.
If you can speak to this, where do you see possible limitations that may hinder some of these ambitions from being achieved?
It's a very noble ambition Botswana has to become a high-income country within, I think it's 13 years from 12 years from now. Botswana has got a long track record of brilliant economic performance. Remember, it is the richest country in continental Africa. When the IMF did that very famous report, the 10 success stories of around the world, Botswana was one of those 10 success stories. But a few grey hairs on my head, I have been coming to Botswana for a long time. It has always been the objective of Botswana to diversify the economy, to create entrepreneurship, to be beyond diamonds. And Botswana has not achieved that objective. For all your other successes, Botswana has not achieved that objective. And we should be very careful not to apportion blame. I think the key point is how difficult this is to achieve. Right? You're very dependent on diamonds, on mining. You're very related to South Africa. You have a stronger economy across the border, which is always going to be more efficient in many ways than you are. So Botswana has a big ambition, and you need to get this right to move beyond diamonds and develop your economy. But just my simple warning is, it's hard. It's really hard to do. And again, I've been hearing this for a long time, and Botswana has not made great successes along that road, unfortunately.
During your presentation, you spoke of a need for the Sub-Saharan Africa region to implement inward-looking policies to spur SME growth. Further unpack that and how these policies can help Sub-Saharan Africa region develop competitive advantages to unlock regional value chains that will receive support as the AFCFTA gains traction.
So Africa rightly has ambitions to become an integrated economic area, and all the things you spoke about, boosting SMEs, and very good speech from your minister talking about entrepreneurship and development. Again, however, this is difficult. So it's long been noted that Africa trades so much more with the rest of the world, originally Europe and now China, for your exports, and there's very little inter-Africa trade. And the problem Africa has is that you all produce the same things. We all produce the same things. We're all mining, primary sector producers. There are obviously exceptions. South Africa is an exception. Botswana, Namibia, a little bit up the value curve. Rwanda really doing exceptionally well. But the scope for inter-regional trade is fairly limited, and the bureaucrats never quite get to where the politicians would like it to go. You can make these grand ambitions about free trade, but you drive your truck to the border and free trade suddenly doesn't exist when you're trying to get it across the border. There's also infrastructure limitations. Railway lines are concentrated in certain countries. Rail gauges can change if you go from Anglophone, English-speaking Africa to Francophone, French-speaking Africa. So it's a noble ambition. Once again, it's very tough to implement.
Welcome back to the program. Tonight's episode unpacks the national budget speech through discussions with industry experts and other economic stakeholders. At this point of the show, we have a conversation with Hollywood actor Denim Richards. The premise of our discussion was around what an aspiring actor in Botswana can do to find international exposure. Denim, thank you so much for coming on First Issues and affording us your time. We are at the First National Bank Budget Review Seminar, the evening session, where various industry experts and key stakeholders review the national budget and viable ways that Botswana can achieve her high income status, right? One of those being the film industry. And with you being an actor, perhaps you could share with us how you got into the space and how you've grown in your career as an actor in Hollywood.
It's a great space. I look at it more so as the business of entertainment because it is a big business, right? I say this all the time, and within 10 years, it'll be $1 trillion business. I've been doing arts and entertainment for over 20 years in Hollywood, but for I would say I would say more like 14 of those years, I wasn't really making a lot of money. I slept in my car, did a lot of free things, and I realized very quickly that passion was gonna make me poor. And so I needed to understand the way that business works. And business of entertainment is your brand. And so every artist can have a passion, but that passion has to be scalable. Scalable meaning you have to be able to turn whatever it is that you're doing into making money. And so I realized very quickly, I started reading a lot of business books, started listening to different entrepreneurs, and I started treating life like that. Then I got very fortunate as I started building my career. Now I'm on the #1 television show in the US, Yellowstone, starring along Kevin Costner. The great thing about Hollywood is it's very, very competitive, right? You get almost 1 million people every single year going into Hollywood just to do arts and entertainment. 98% of those people end up going back after the first year because they're like, it's so hard. The money is, you don't make that much money. The cost of living is very expensive. For example, in Studio City, where I used to live, a 1-bedroom apartment would be like the equivalent of like 30,000 pula. So imagine being a struggling artist and saying, I'm gonna move, I'm gonna take my career seriously, and then going into that space, and then saying you need headshots and all these other things. But one of the things I did is I moved outside of Los Angeles, and then I realized I have to go to every opportunity, but I had to have quality products. So you have to have a headshot, right? You have to have a demo reel or a show reel, right? So that you can get it in front of producers. And I also did a lot of free shows so that I could get in front of people. And this was hard because, like I said, I was living in my car at a certain point. But I still was never willing to compromise the product and the process of what it took. So I would go to every audition, and finally I started getting 1 or 2 auditions, started booking some gigs. But while I was at that gig, my process of professionalism ultimately allowed me to get to other opportunities. And so I did my first starring feature film, which is Chickasaw Rancher, which is out on Netflix as well. And one of the actors on that said, man, I know some producers of some guys I was working with before. They're doing this new show called Yellowstone. You got to call your team. You got to get on top of that. Then one thing led to another, and now I'm on the #1 show in the US.
Well, you know, Botswana is not so known for its film and television industry, and some people would go so far as to say that it is not recognized at all. So for a very passionate Botswana who's looking to pursue acting as a career, how do they go about making sure that they are found or exposed to the international stage or the international film and television arena?
And you have to look at brands, right? Look at big businesses. For example, in South Africa or in the US, Starbucks is a major brand. Look at something like Hilton, right? These are brands that are all over the world. Every time you go somewhere, if you say like, look, I don't know where to stay, you're like, you type in, you're like a Hilton, and you go there because there's a quality standard. So part of you as being an artist is to recognize what is your brand? What is it that you do well? Whether you're a painter or a writer or a producer, director, and you have to lean into that. Too many artists, when they're younger, are so afraid of missing opportunities that when they finally get in front of somebody that might be able to do something with them, they say, oh, I'm a writer, I'm a director, I'm a producer, I'm a dancer, I'm a lighting assistant. It's like, you're everything. And then they ask you, what do you do well? And they're like, everything. And it's like, but what do you really do well? And it's like, oh, I'm an actor. And it's like, so that's what you do. So you should always pick one thing and focus on that one thing, cultivate that. Part of that is the branding opportunity. You have to look at your socio-economic state. If you're looking at, for instance, you said don't use Botswana, so we use something like Hollywood. There's thousands of auditions that are happening monthly and yearly that you have the opportunity to get into. Not everything is going to make sure that you're a star on television. I tell people all the time, if your goal in life is to be a star, you're in the wrong business. Stars are created, they're not made, right? So what that means is that anybody can become a star with the right branding. So you have to know who you are. You have to know what your skill set is. And then you have to say, okay, how do I market that? For an example, I'm an actor. I know the type of acting. I don't really do comedy. So I'm not going to put myself in situations where I'm supposed to be a comedy person. Instead, I'm going to lean on opportunities to do more dramatic things, right? So these are those types of opportunities. From there, you need to make sure everybody in this generation has social media, right? Your social media is also your brand. We look at it more so as your business card. If I'm interested in you and I say, hey man, what's your social media? Whatever you're doing every single day should represent exactly what it is that you're saying that you are. So if you're saying that you're an actor, when I go to your social media, I should see things that remind me of acting, that lean into that. If you are the type of person that takes life seriously, like you're a humanitarian, you should be getting involved with these different organizations. These are the types of ways that you start to brand yourself so that when somebody sees you, when they say your name, there's brand recognition, and that's how you build your business.